So guys, what is your favorite LEGO castle faction? In this video, we're going to talk about all the castle factions, including the bad, the ugly, and the what the, and of course, my favorite. Now I know you all assume that the Black Falcons are my favorite because I'm building the Black Falcon castle, but you know what assuming gets you. Well, the wrong answer. While I do love the Black Falcons, they still fall second to my favorite faction of all time, but you'll have to wait till I get to them. So let's dive right into this and start with the Pink Knight. Now the Pink Knights, or also known as the Knights of the Yellow Castle, were the first knights that we got. They came with that first iconic yellow castle, which is a great classic set, but the figures just lack a lot of detail for me, and I don't like the fact that you have to place a sticker on their chest plate. Now, I do know these were made in the late 70s, but I'm a sucker for detail, and I know that we all hate stickers. And now we did get a revamped version of this fig back in the CMF Series 23, which did not look bad, but it was still lacking something. That silver pink and that pearl gold look just did not do it for me. Now, a little later in time, LEGO drops one of the greatest factions of all time, the Black Falcons. Now I'm sorry, but if you don't like the Black Falcons, there's just something wrong with you. They came out originally in 6 sets in the mid-80s, but are still being produced today with their new updated look. Their sigil is one of the most iconic LEGO images in the castle theme, and deserve to be on top tier of any castle fan's list. Now they did have some amazing sets like the Knight's Castle and the Black Falcon Fortress, and were included in the most recent release in the Medieval Blacksmith, and also the 90 Years of LEGO The Lion Knight's Castle. And I do know that it was a Lion Knight's Castle. I kind of wish it was a Black Falcon Castle. It would have been much cooler. But can we just be happy that we finally got another castle set? Now the Lion Knight, or also known as the Crusaders, are another faction that is extremely popular. There was tons of sets, with some of them being the best castle sets that we have seen, that included these guys in their blue and red color scheme. These guys were kind of created to be like the Black Falcon's arch enemies, but we all know who is the best one out of them too, don't we? These figs have always looked great, but I actually have a huge problem with them. There's just way too many factions that feature a lion's head, and I don't believe that these are the best ones. Another lion head sigil faction is the Royal Knights. The Royal Knights do have some good sets and a huge following as one of the originals that a lot of people grew up with, but their figures are just too plain to me. I feel like the Red Lions, which is technically the next lion faction to come out with that sigil, are much better. Their figures are just clean and crisp, and with the Kingdom sets, we also got one of the best castle sets of all time, the Kingdom's Joust. There's also the Lion Kingdom, but I do feel they're the worst out of them all, with the Lion Knights, the Royal Knights, and the Red Lions. The Lion Knights definitely triumph the rest in minifigs, but with sets, I'm not really sure they will win. But what do you guys think? Did that 90th anniversary castle really win like the best castle set of all time? Now for the next faction, we're going to go on to one of the even cooler ones in my opinion, because they really don't have fortresses that aren't built in trees. And that is the Forestmen. The other factions had huge castles and hideouts and keeps, while this faction was built around trees. Now these guys do rank high in my list, probably like around 5 or 6, but they still fall short in the knight category to me. Now there were also the Dark Forestmen, whose outfits were a little different but still had the same deer as a sigil, and they really didn't have that many sets to drop with them either. Now on to the Wolfpack faction. I do believe that it had to be one of the highest potentials of all time, but just wasn't done much with. There were only 3 sets that even had these guys in it, and I do wish they would have gotten a remake of these. I mean, come on, look at that sigil. It's like absolutely perfect. This for me is another one of those top 5 factions. Skipping ahead quite a bit in time, I give you the Fright Knight. Now with that cool of a name, you'd expect these guys to just be killer, but in my opinion, they are very lackluster. They did have an absolute monster in a castle set, being one of the tallest ones, and it did give us the wonderful Basil the Bat Lord, but other than Basil and a really nice CMF, they really fell short. And now on to the Black Knights. These guys I love. They had an amazing sigil I loved, and some of the really awesome sets they did, like the Black Monarch's Castle, which happens to be like the first black castle that we ever received, and this is another faction that I would love to see a modern remake of. I know that we judge a lot of the stuff we look at by sets and sigils and stuff like that, but these guys just fall so high. They were one of the first castle knights that we ever got to be like technically the bad guys. And these are one that I do really wish they would have made a remake of. If they would have remade these, there would have never been such thing as a Black Falcon Castle in my whole entire house. It would be simply dedicated to these Black Knights. Now you got the red, the green, and the yellow shield with that amazing dragon on it, and it gave us the Dragon Masters. Not only did they release a molded dragon, but also our first wizard. These guys happen to be one of the nicest factions of all time. They came out with like mismatched arms and legs and nothing really prepared us to see how cool those helmets were. I mean, that helmet with all those attachments on it looks like an absolute beast. These sets were extremely good and gave us some raised base plates and really opened our eyes on the playability factor. These are also another one of those top tier factions. You cannot go without getting these guys, at least in your collection. That green, red, and yellow shield is absolutely crisp. Now, the Bull Knights are one of the factions I do not quite understand. Their sigil is a bull, but the helmets and the higher ups all have the same Dragon Master helmets, and they didn't get very many sets, and to my knowledge, they're just not very popular. There's not too many people that you hear talking about the Bull Knights. Which brings me to another faction, the Scorpion Knight. The Scorpion Knights are another one I do not understand. These guys aren't in my top 5 or even top 10. I will also include the Rogue Knights in this category because it's a horrible design and something I'm not even sure why they created. Their shield has an orange color and their torsos and legs are yellow, which is kind of making them appear naked, which is just dumb. Why wouldn't they have done it in that orange color that they printed on the shield? They had the color. Now let's get on to some better factions like the Crown Knights. The Crown Knights gave us some amazing fantasy sets, and they gave us the next molded dragon, which was way better than the old one. It just killed it. These sets were all normal in my opinion and included tons of play features with like catapults and such, but that medieval market was definitely a flagship set. It is something that if you go to a convention today, there is plenty of them that are sealed that are selling at a very high price. This, I do believe, gives us a throwback to the old Pink Knights. This is one of the few factions that doesn't have a animal as a sigil. The dark blue and silver figs look really good, including some really amazing prints. And in my opinion, just happen to be one of the best fantasy factions that we got. Now let's talk about the Skeleton. The Skeleton Knights were the bad guys and had a really cool sigil, but overall there's not too much to say about these figures. All they really are is simply skeletons. You can't do much. Now their flags were absolutely cool. I love that skeleton design, but I wish they could have done more with this, like at least create some chest plates for them and throw some different kind of designs on there to really make them stand out. But I mean, they've been throwing skeletons and stuff all the way back to the pirates, so they needed to do something, in my opinion, to revamp these and make these look a lot better. Also with that fantasy era, we got the Orcs. These are one of the coolest factions from the fantasy era in my opinion, not only including great printed figs, but also big figs. Their warship set is great, and those fabric sails with that huge orc skull flying just makes a real statement piece. Now, all the figs had an underbite that was printed on the heads until we got the new CMF from earlier this year, which gave us that large jaw piece. The shield is also one of the coolest shapes in my opinion. It's not a boring triangle or an oval, but is actually a huge rectangle with the corners shaved, and the print kind of makes it look like it's on old wood. Now the next dragon faction I'm going to talk about is the Green Dragons. They were the worst faction to fly that dragon sigil in my opinion. The pearl, dark gray, and green were unique, but not something that really won me over. The brown and black castles that all came with these guys were also a huge no for me. Brown and black just did not look together in castle form, and these guys eventually led us to the red dragons. Now these guys aren't as bad with a color scheme, and I do believe that dragon head breathing fire is really cool, but these prints could have been a lot better. And of course there's always CMFs that kind of get released that have factions that have nothing to do with sets whatsoever, like the Bear Knights. Bear Knights looked extremely good and was something different that we had never received, but the CMF line absolutely killed it with the Raven Knights. The Black Ravens were absolutely amazing. It is one of the best color schemes I believe that we done in any of the castle factions, and are definitely one of the top tier. I really wish they would have done something with these and added some sets to them, because they could have really killed the castle theme with these guys. I know out of all these factions that people still think that the Black Falcons are my number 1, but they're not. They're actually my number 2. My number 1 is actually that red, green, and yellow Dragon Master. There's just something about them that I absolutely love. That logo is very iconic, and if you see it anywhere, you automatically know what it is. Now you know my number 1 is the Dragon Masters, my 2 is the Black Falcons, my 3 has to be those Black Ravens. I think they are flawless. Number 4 is Lion Knights, and number 5 is Wolfpack. Wolfpack I really wish they would have done something else with though. But now that you've made it to the end of this video, if you liked it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment your top 5 down below. Peace.